So back in the days when I was still young, my father always told us stories about dragon people. Not mermaids, dragon people. And these dragon people live under the water throughout the world, but he mainly talked about the ones in Southeast Asia. And these dragon people were blamed for the deaths and disappearances of loved ones, especially around bodies of water. And whether you believe in the human race that lives under the water or beneath the earth's surface, I can tell you that there are countless stories out there about a human race that lives in our oceans or body of water. And the more I think about and compare these stories that my father told us about these dragon people, comparing to the modern day mermaid encounters, there are a lot of similarities. For example, there was one story that caught my attention, and that was the dam in Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe has a really well established, firm belief of mermaids, and they call these mermaid beings Juzus. Of course, not all of Zimbabwe believe in mermaids, but a lot of people do believe that there is some kind of human being or humanoid creature that lives in these waters. Whether these beings are flesh and blood just like you and me, or water spirits. The belief in these entities or water spirits is taken very seriously all across Zimbabwe. So jumping back to the story about the dam in Zimbabwe, in January 2012, there was a dam in Zimbabwe that needed repair. This dam suddenly stopped working, and it prompted divers to plunge into the murky depths to investigate. And while these divers were down there investigating to why this dam suddenly stopped working, they returned to the surface and were clearly shaken, refusing to go back down there into the waters. And when these divers were questioned as to why they were so afraid to get back in the water, they spoke of an unnerving presence lurking with them in the waters, and a sensation of being grasped by unseen hands. So something was clearly touching them and bumping into them while they were down there investigating. Despite these claims, they decided to hire new divers and send them down there to continue the investigation. And while these new workers were down there investigating, they suddenly came back up and said that something was grabbing them and bumping to them, and they also refused to get back in the water. Now you have two different groups with the same encounter. It's gotten so bad to the point where these local divers did not want to get back into the water anymore, and told the Water Resource Minister Samuel C.P. Como that if they didn't do a ritual or ceremony to please the water spirit, they would never get back into the water. So they had to make a decision, and their decision was to hire these foreign divers that were out of country to come in to continue this investigation as to why this dam stopped working. And their thought process behind this decision was many of these locals believe in water spirits and mermaids. So going out there and hiring these foreign workers who, in a sense, don't have any beliefs in water spirits or mermaids, maybe that was just what they need to complete this task. And after some time, these foreign workers will arrive on site, and they too will go down there, do their investigation, to come back up and refuse to get back in the water because they report that something was touching them and they felt a sense of dread being down there. So the repair of the dam has been delayed for quite some times now because they can't get anybody to go down there to repair the dam. It's gotten so bad to the point where they had to hold a press conference to tell the locals and the people around there as to why this task wasn't getting completed. And they came out and said that it was due to the mermaids and the water spirits that was terrifying their divers, and this was the reason why this dam wasn't getting repaired in time. And in their own words, they said, "We even hired whites, thinking that our boys did not want to work." But they also returned saying that they would not return to work there again. And they were talking about the foreign workers that they hired overseas. So the only thing left to do was to hire a traditional healer to conduct rituals, and that's exactly what they did. As healers performed ceremonies and livestock was slaughtered to please the water spirits, local divers then felt a lot more confidence to get back in the water to complete their task. And despite all these terrifying tales, the repairs were eventually completed. However, the strange occurrences did not end there. Shortly after, the locals would report rocks being thrown at them from the river while they were walking the trails. Fishermen will also report this as well, It's as if something was trying to shoo them away from the river by hurtling rocks at them. And it wasn't just rocks being thrown at them. At least 4 people passed away shortly after the dam was repaired. 2 of them were young schoolboys who perished near the dam. And this was apparently witnessed by numerous people who even reported that the boys resurfaced at least once on a rock, then they were then pulled into the water by something. It is reported that these 2 young boys were herding cattle when they saw a mermaid at the dam. According to a friend of the deceased, the 2 boys jumped into the dam and tried to grab a mermaid because they believed that it was a big fish. But the mermaid pulled them down to the water, and the last time they seen these 2 boys was when they hurtled themselves onto a rock, but was then suddenly pulled underwater again by something. It's been reported that the 2 other individuals that died at the same dam perished under similar circumstances. Most people will point to the crocodiles as being the cause of these 2 boys' deaths, but as these 2 boys' bodies were found, there was no reports of any puncture marks or any wound a crocodile may inflict. It's as if these 2 boys just drowned. Even before the dam repair incident, there's been many reports of mermaids throughout Zimbabwe. But as the years went on, there's been many mermaid sightings throughout the world and Zimbabwe alone. Whether you believe in mermaids or not, the earliest known mermaid legends can be traced back thousands of years to ancient Assyria, where the goddess Atargatis was depicted as a deity in both human and fish attributes. And in Greek mythology, sirens were sea nymphs who lure sailors to the doom with their enchanted, beautiful voices. And these sirens were depicted to not have fishtails, but sirens were often associated with mermaid archetype. I believe if anyone was to have an encounter with mermaids, it would be those who spend much of their time out at sea. There are a lot of reports out there that comes from deep sea fishermen, but there are also well-documented reports out there that comes from our great explorers of the world. For example, on January 9th, 1493, Christopher Columbus was sailing near the Dominican Republic and wrote in his journal about 3 mermaids he saw. He said in his own words, "They were not as beautiful as they are painted, although to some extent they have human appearances in their face." Another one comes from Henry Hudson, who is a famous English sea explorer who sailed all over the world, and he writes in his journal, "This morning, one of our companies looking overboard saw a mermaid, and calling up some of the companies to see her. One more came up, and by that time, she came so close to the ship's side, looking earnestly at the men. A little after, the sea came and overturned her. From the navel upward, her back and breasts were like a woman's. Her body big as one of us, her skin very white, and long hair hanging down behind of colored black. In her going down, they saw her tail, which was the tail of a porpoise and speckled like a mackerel." And the next sighting comes from Captain John Smith in 1614. And yes, this is the same dude in Pocahontas. And we all know the story of Pocahontas and John Smith, but did you know that he actually saw a mermaid? So while he was sailing off the coast of Massachusetts, he writes, "The upper part of her body resembles that of a woman, and she was swimming about all possible grace near the shore. It had large eyes, rather too round, a finely shaped nose, well-formed ears, rather too long, and her long green hair imparted to her an original character by no means unattractive." So this guy was literally in The Little Mermaid and Pocahontas at the same time. But if you guys dig through the archives and go through the documentations and sightings of mermaids throughout history, there are hundreds if not thousands of reports out there of mermaids. And I encourage everybody to read up or look at these documentation, even if you don't believe in the existence of mermaids. It is quite fascinating, but what does this mermaid subject have to do with the dragon people that my father and many of the older generations always talk about? And these dragon people were known to be as Zhang, so you translate that, the word Zhang is dragon, and we believe these Zhang live in large bodies of water, or in certain bodies of water where people disappear or die a lot. These dragon people were known to have inhuman powers, so they could transform into humans and they could bring deaths upon, individuals that they want to take with them. So when they do transform into humans, they are known to be, some of the most beautiful and handsome people out there. That's the reason why they coerce these individuals to become their bride or groom. And the way how these individuals will come into the village, as reported, and they would say that these individuals would be dressed in jewels, along with a wardrobe that was scaly and shimmering. But they were known to take people to their world, spiritually or physically, and they were known to also drown fishermen to make them their slaves in the underworld. So there's a lot of folklore and stuff revolving around this dragon people, or Zhang. But the reports and the depictions of them are always the same. It's this human race that lives under the water in their own villages in another dimension. And that's when my dad always talks about them. He always mentions that when they take you, you must enter the water. But underneath the water, there are underground caverns or tunnels that lead you to these portals. And those portals will take you to their cities. And these cities are beautiful and looks nothing like ours. They are filled with jewels and everyone dresses in them as well. So I'm guessing they're just full of jewels or, full of very nice, clothings. But as I remember these stories and retain them throughout the years, there's been countless stories in Zimbabwe of people who have been taken by the mermaids and seen their cities and came back to tell their stories. These stories are the same exact stories my father always told us about dragon people, because in my culture, there's been people who went down to these dragon people's cities and made it back to the surface to tell their stories, and their stories are very identical to the people in Zimbabwe. So in my personal opinion, I believe these dragon people my father and culture have always talked about for many generations are actually mermaids. And that is all I have for you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode of me talking about mermaids. I had a lot of fun talking about it, and I love coming back on the mic and just talking. So for those of you who are new here that enjoyed this episode and just kind of like my take on things like this, please like and subscribe. I will see you guys all again on the next episode of Late Night Strange. And like always, stay strange, everybody. Bye bye now.